We can start out with the creative bankruptcy of remaking another animated classic instead of making something new.
Snow White should be beautiful. She should turn up on set. Her skin should be white as snow, and she shouldn't. What's next? A bald Rapunzel?
The dwarves are an ungodly nightmare.
These were dream roles. 7 dream roles
Yes.
in a major production.
Yeah.
A major production.
It's the complete absurdity of modern Hollywood. They are so desperate not to offend anyone that they end up screwing up.
Why don't you just sell ice cream? Are you going to return your building to the people on whose land is put?
No.
Wow. Should that land be handed back to Ukraine on principle?
I don't know.
Go woke, go broke has become a popular way of describing the massive consumer backlash to corporations who, for some reason, lose a lot of money after telling their customers they're all racist bigots. You might be hearing it a lot over the next few days as Disney's sanitized Snow White remake finally hits theatres amid what critics say is the biggest PR disaster in movie history. Much more on that later. But we'll begin with an intriguing debate about so-called corporate activism and two business titans with very different views on whether brands should brandish their virtuous liberal worldviews. Anson Frericks was a top executive at AB InBev for 11 years. He had a front row seat for the Dylan Mulvaney debacle, which sparked the collapse of America's top beer at a cost of billions. His new book, Last Call for Bud Light, charts the rapid rise and recent fall of corporate DEI. Ben Cohen is the co-founder of Ben & Jerry's, one of the world's most famous ice cream brands. Besides selling creamy indulgences, Ben & Jerry's campaigns for the return of stolen lands to Indigenous Americans and the dismantling of the white supremacy. So welcome to both of you, two successful men with very different views about this. Ben Cohen, first of all, thank you for coming on. As you know, I ripped into you in a New York Post column, I think it was a year or two ago, about your wokist activities and was extremely uncomplimentary. So I admire a man who's prepared to come and face the music and feel free to rip me back. But just on a general point, Ben & Jerry's have been extremely active in this area. Interestingly, unlike a lot of the other companies that have gone down this route or tested the water with it, you don't seem at Ben & Jerry's to have suffered any negative backlash, which is probably one of the reasons why you keep doing it. But do you accept that a lot of other companies have tripped up spectacularly by dipping their toes into the woke waters?
Well, I think what we're talking about is fairness and justice. There's a bunch of people in our society that have been oppressed, that have been discriminated against, women, people of color. And, you know, I think business is really the most powerful force in our society. And business has a responsibility to help to undo the wrongs that have been done in the society and help to repair the society.
Why don't you just sell ice cream? I mean, why? I mean, I like your ice cream. I've eaten a lot of your ice cream. I will continue to eat it despite your wokeism. But as I think I ended my column for the Post, it's like, why should an ice cream company feel it's part of their remit to constantly harangue us about issues and social activism?
Well, we're talking about standing up for what I thought were basic American values of freedom, justice, equality. You know, business, as I say, is the most powerful force in the society. Business controls our legislation through lobbying. It controls who gets elected through campaign donations. Business is a very political creature. It's just that usually it's done covertly. And at Ben & Jerry's, we do it overtly. And we say we are a values-led company. These are the values that drive us, along with making great ice cream and making a profit. And are you also a hypocrisy company, right? I'll give you an example. You know, in 2022, July 4th, Independence Day, a great day for Americans, a terrible day if you're British. If it hadn't been for that George III moment of madness, I think I could have well been king of your country by now, and you might have been a lot better off for it. But on Independence Day, the great day in America's calendar,
Ben & Jerry's demanded that Mount Rushmore be returned to Native Americans. And it all sounded, okay. You've got this big speech you guys made, and you want stolen indigenous land to be returned. You want to dismantle white supremacy systems of oppression. And then somebody went, well, hang on a second. Hang on. Because Ben & Jerry's corporate HQ in Vermont is built on the ancestral home of the Abenaki people, where 3,200 still reside. And they've now demanded reparations from you. We are a place-based people, they said. We are the ones who are in this place. So I'm assuming that as part of your civic duty for American values, Ben, you will be returning your HQ to the Abenaki people as a matter of urgency. Will you?
Well, the point that we've been making is that
well, hang on. Are you going to return your building to the people on whose land is put? Well, it's a serious question.
No.
Wow.
First of all, we don't own the building. But what we're trying to say is that the U.S. Made treaties with Native Americans that the U.S. has kind of ignored.
I get it, but why shouldn't the same rules apply to Ben & Jerry's buildings? Why should you be exempt?
Well, I think that it's a government issue. I think that it's the government that made these treaties.
It's not a principle then?
Say what?
It's not a principle then. It's just you want the government to do it, not you.
Well, I'm saying I'd like the government to live up to its agreement.
Yeah, but this is my problem. With all due respect, this is my problem with the woke brigade. And I say that respectfully. Actually, I'm not even sure I do. Because it always seems to be littered with rank hypocrisy. And I'll give you another example. If you really believe that stolen land should be returned to people, why did you support Ukraine not being given their land back? You personally donated. You personally gave $1 million to a group trying to end Western arms shipments to Ukraine. Does that not, again, just fly in the face of your supposed great high moral principle? Why would you not want Ukraine to have its land back?
Well, I don't think anybody gave $1 million to anybody. I mean, at least not from Ben & Jerry's.
Well, you personally donated $1 million to a group that is literally trying to end Western arms shipments to Ukraine.
Well, I do support the Eisenhower Media Network. It's a group of retired high-level military officers, and that group took out an ad at the very beginning of the war in Ukraine, saying, let's have peace, let's stop fighting, and let's talk together and let's figure this out. And that Russia has legitimate security concerns, just like the U.S. has legitimate security concerns, and Ukraine does too.
But shouldn't Ukraine's sovereign territory, land, by your principle, be handed back to Ukraine, the stuff that Russia's stolen? I mean, it's exactly the same principle, surely, as the indigenous land being taken from them that you made a huge campaign about. When people steal somebody else's land, isn't your principle, Ben Cohen, that you have to give it back? So why would you feel the opposite about Ukraine?
What we believe about Ukraine is that that was a war that was provoked by United States policies. And I want to be clear. This is not Ben & Jerry's. This is Ben.
Right.
Ben & Jerry's has taken no stand.
So does Jerry not agree with you?
I don't know where Jerry's at, actually. I haven't discussed it with him.
Don't tell me you don't know what he thinks. Of course you do. But my point is, what about the land that Vladimir Putin has stolen with his murderous, barbaric rampage? Surely the Ben & Jerry's corporate position should be, as it is with the indigenous people, the land should be handed back to Ukraine. Who owns it?
Ben & Jerry's has not taken a position on Ukraine.
Right, but what do you think?
All wars end in a negotiated settlement.
I get that, but do you think the land should be handed back?
What we were suggesting happen is that let's have the negotiating settlement before the war.
I get it.
Before we have to kill
but before I go to
Anson,
Anson, be waiting very patiently, should that land be handed back to Ukraine on principle? Piers Morgan Uncensored is now proudly independent. If you like the show, we ask for only one thing. Subscribe on YouTube and follow Piers Morgan Uncensored on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Now let's get straight to the point. Support for today's show comes from a business focused on a critical issue: prosperity. US national debt is at crisis levels, inflation has made life more expensive for everybody, and the stock market is precarious. It's enough to make anyone's financial future feel grim. So what is the solution? Well, a simple one is to opt out of the chaos and invest in something solid and reliable: physical gold and silver. And there's only one name you need to remember: American Hartford Gold. This company has earned the trust of thousands of customers with an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and glowing reviews you can see for yourself. They offer an incredible range of gold and silver bars and coins. They can be delivered directly to your door, or they'll help you set them up in a tax-advantaged gold IRA. First-class customer service makes the whole process simple, secure, and straightforward. American Hartford Gold is committed to getting the truth out there and giving you peace of mind in uncertain times. And if that wasn't enough, you'll get up to $15,000 worth of free silver when you make your first purchase and mention my name, Piers. So make the smart move. Call 866-692-2474 or text Piers, that's P-I-E-R-S, to 65532. That's 866-692-2474 or text Piers to 65532. All the details are in the description. Now on with the show.
I don't know.
Okay. Look, viewers can make their own minds up, but it seems like there's a lot of swirling double standards going on here. Anson, let me bring you in here. We know what happened with the Bud Light fiasco. I could have told everybody at Bud Light this was going to happen. You put Dylan Mulvaney, who until Dylan Mulvaney was 26 was a gay man, and then suddenly says, oh, actually, I'm now going to be a woman. You put them in charge of one of the more ludicrous social media campaigns I think I've ever seen a company embark on, which flew in the face of everything that Bud Light kind of stood for. And you end up with Kid Rock firing a machine gun at Bud Light bottles and a catastrophic drop in sales, down 30%, I think, in the year after, lost its position as number one. And it reminded me of what happened with Gillette when they did the same thing and basically told all their customers like me that you're all a bunch of Harvey Weinsteins until you can prove otherwise, in the most damning, sneering commercial imaginable. And then when they lost $9 billion worth of business, they reversed and went back to big he-men clutching babies, which was pretty much what I wanted to see, because I wanted to feel good about being a man, not shamed. So look, what's your view of this?
Yeah, so what this comes down to for me, Piers, it's really about brand and authenticity. Like, do I necessarily like the hypocrisy at Ben and Jerry's? Do I like some of what I think that some flawed political stances? No, but I do actually respect Ben a lot. I actually write about this a ton in my book. I respect their company because at least they're very authentic to what they've always been, which they sell ice cream to advance a socially progressive mission. I mean, they put it right on their website. So there's no hiding what they're doing. And on their website, they say that we're going to support the Black Lives Matter movement, that we're going to support basically, illegal immigration, that we're going to support biological men competing against women in sports. I mean, it's right on their website, and they're using ice cream to do it. And they have names like Empower Mint for voting rights issues and Pecan Resist to resist the Trump agenda. I actually don't have an issue with Ben and Jerry's and their branding. That's their brand. That's their customer. Some people like that. It's a free country, and you can compete with whoever you want. The issue that I have, and this is the issue with what happened with Bud Light, it's when companies that aren't authentically what Ben and Jerry's was, which is a socially political brand, when all of a sudden that they were foisted on them an agenda to be politicized. And I can get all the reasons why, where there's really it was almost a group of asset managers like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard pushing ESG agenda. You had all these consulting companies like McKinsey and Bain that were promoting DEI consulting services and selling there. You had all these activist groups, the Human Rights Campaign and others that Ben and Jerry's and others support, putting a lot of pressure on companies to adopt essentially the same exact policies that Ben and Jerry's had for brands like Bud Light that had nothing to do with social activism. I mean, if you take a look at Bud Light, their whole point was to be easy to drink and easy to enjoy. They became the biggest beer brand in America precisely because they were not involved in politics. They were involved in things that brought folks together, like sports and music and humor. That's what they were all about. So then all of a sudden, when this company does a partnership with Dylan Mulvaney, who's a very controversial transgender influencer, who was essentially had really nothing to do with beer, and somebody who was at the forefront, I mean, at Joe Biden's White House, of advocating for gender affirmation care, and then also advocating for biological men to compete against women in sports, all of a sudden the Bud Light consumer stepped back and said, wait a minute, like, this isn't the brand that I drink. Bud Light, for me, it was more historically about sports and UFC and all that stuff. What happened? And I think that's where Bud Light got lost. And that's where you have to start making distinctions about you as a brand. You have to stand for something. Ben & Jerry's stands for political activism and, maybe a little bit of hypocrisy. But I think Bud Light, which was supposed to be easy to drink, easy to enjoy, was different. And then other brands on the right, you have brands like Black Rifle Coffee Company, which their whole mission is they want to serve coffee and culture to firefighters, military, police officers, people who love America. Let those companies, let Black Rifle be Black Rifle. Let Bud Light be Bud Light. Let Ben & Jerry's be Ben & Jerry's, but don't necessarily have every company have to get Ben & Jerry'd in terms of the policies that they've had. That's where corporate America went wrong over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, do you think that some of the positions that Ben & Jerry's took, I mean, take the issue of transgender athletes in women's sport, for example. Pretty much everyone I know now, even Gavin Newsom has done a U-turn on this, who's the king of woke in terms of politics. Do you think with reflection, that it is grotesquely unfair for biological males who identify as trans women to compete in women's sport?
I don't really know enough about the issue.
But it's a Ben & Jerry's policy, isn't it? Like, you support it.
It well may be, but all I'm saying is that I personally, not positively, no.
Wow.
I think that I would kind of leave it to the people that are playing the sports. Let them decide.
Well, how do you do that if you let the trans athletes compete in women's sport and beat women?
Well, you let the teams, the whole group that's playing, let them decide.
So that you don't have any official position at all, because the point was the Biden administration actively supported it. So nothing was going to happen until you had a president like Trump come along and say, this is ridiculous. I'm surprised you don't even know whether Ben & Jerry's supported that.
And so, I mean, I'll answer that for you, Piers. They do. It's on their website right now. You can see that Ben & Jerry's, they're a proud supporter of the Human Rights Campaign, which is a group that on their website today, it says that there is no issue with transgender athletes competing in sports. Yet, all of a sudden, it was only 2 years ago, you had Leah Thomas, who took a medal away from Riley Gaines. And then I think in 2019 was one of the first instances. There was a transgender person named Cici Tofar that beforehand in 2017, 2018 competed in men's hurdles in the 400 meters and then ended up winning the gold that year.
No, it's all completely ridiculous. I mean, there are I think it was the UN. The UN did a report recently saying I think nearly 900 medals have been taken away from female competitors around the world because trans athletes had won. And that's just simply unfair. But Ben, I'm curious about this because you are the Ben of Ben and Jerry's. And yet here you are apparently seemingly oblivious to these very strident but controversial positions that your company is taking. Do you not feel a little bit queasy about that?
Well, I believe in transgender rights. I know that the company believes in transgender rights.
Do you believe in women's rights?
Yeah.
Do you believe in women's rights to fairness and equality and safety?
Yes.
So, I mean, I don't know your story, but do you have any daughters or?
I do.
Would you be happy if suddenly a biological male got in a boxing ring with them if they were a boxer and started beating them up as we saw it happen? We saw it happen in the Paris Olympics. No, but I know we can laugh about it, but I watched the Paris Olympics and there was an Algerian boxer in the female category who was banned from the World Championships for testing positive for male chromosomes, who beat up a young Italian female fighter so badly she quit after 40 seconds thinking she was going to die. So this has real-time consequence. And if Ben & Jerry's is going to be this big social activist company preaching to us all about these big issues, A, I'd expect you to know as one of the founders what those issues are. I'm surprised you don't. And B, I would expect Ben & Jerry's to reflect on some of the positions it's taken and accept, as many, many other people are now doing, you were just plain wrong.
Well, I would say that these are not really big issues. These are issues that are used to hide the big issues. I would say the big issues are our country is spending $900 billion a year, half of our entire discretionary federal budget, on the Pentagon, on getting ready to kill loads of people just like us in other countries. I don't know where you went. All I see is me on the screen.
No, we're back. We're just giving you the full screen so the viewers can enjoy the full glory
Thank
of your head. Piers Morgan Uncensored is proudly independent. Our sponsors mean we can bring it to you for free. Support for today's show comes from Beam, who can help you out with an issue of utmost importance: sleep. Good sleep, as I can confirm, is the foundation of physical and mental health. Our daily performance depends on it. That's why we are delighted to talk about Beam's Dream Powder, a science-backed, healthy hot cocoa for sleep. It's tested for high-quality efficiency and formulated to ease your body into rest, supporting the 4 stages of the sleep cycle to help you fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. Many other sleep aids cause next-day grogginess, but Dream contains a powerful, all-natural blend of reishi magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin. It helps you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. If you, like me, need a good lie down after an uncensored debate, you can try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder with 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/Piers and use code Piers at checkout. That's shopbeam, BEAM.com/Piers, P-I-E-R-S, and promo code Piers at checkout. Now, on with the show.
Thank you very much. So what I was saying was that these are not really big issues. It doesn't involve a whole lot of people. But when you talk about how they're spending our money, how the government is spending our money, taking half of all of the discretionary budget to create a war machine that just kind of benefits war profiteers at the expense of everybody else, I would say that's a big issue that we ought to be concerned about instead of being distracted.
Okay, but if it's not a big issue, why is it all over the Ben & Jerry's website? Why don't you tell them to take it down if no one cares about it?
There's lots of issues. Some are bigger, some are smaller, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but that one to you is insignificant. So it shouldn't really be on the website, should it?
Well, when it's versus spending our national treasure and our soldiers and our national spirit on preparing to kill millions of people, I think that's a big issue.
In 2021, Ben & Jerry's announced it was blocking all sales of its ice cream in Israel's West Bank, which it called the occupied Palestinian territory. So you felt strongly, that the West Bank should be just left alone, given back because it was Palestinian land, left with the Palestinians?
Well, we felt like Israel was mistreating the Palestinians.
But in relation to the land of the West Bank, it was owned by Palestinians and should be returned to them in totality.
The position that Ben & Jerry's took was that we disagreed with how Israel was treating Palestinians. It was kind of an apartheid system. But
what should happen to the West Bank?
Against various UN resolutions.
Yeah, I get it.
Against international law.
I get that. But what should happen to the West Bank then?
I don't have an answer to that question.
Really?
Really?
But that was a Ben & Jerry's campaign. You literally banned your ice cream from being sold there because you called it
and
occupied
it was about the
Palestinian territory. So clearly you feel that the Israelis should get out of the West Bank, right? Otherwise you wouldn't have run that.
I mean, we believe in a two-state solution.
So do I.
I don't know where the boundary should be, but
you called the West Bank an occupied Palestinian territory.
It is.
Okay, so
is it not?
Well, I'm just going to ask you a follow-up. So you have an objection to occupied territory, do you?
We certainly have an objection, along with the rest of the world and the UN.
No, but do you have as a company, you have an objection to the idea of countries occupying territory that doesn't belong to them, in your eyes?
In general, yes. I mean, I
so
think
why
that
not
what
Ukraine?
Was what was
I don't
supposed
understand. Why is Ukraine not allowed to keep its territory? Why would you be happy for Putin to take that? What's the difference?
I didn't say that. What I said was that we were against the war. We called for a ceasefire.
Right.
It was not Ben and Jerry's. It was Ben and the Eisenhower Media Network that was doing
So
that.
should Ukraine have its land back that Putin's taken?
You know, the way wars work is my understanding, and I emphasize that we were totally against this war, which was a war of choice. The way wars work is there's a negotiated settlement at the end, and somebody gets some territory.
So that could apply.
I mean, what is the alternative?
Sorry, but by that criteria, that should apply with the Israel-Hamas war then, which might include land in Gaza, land in the West Bank. It's the same thing. It's a war, and by your yardstick in Ukraine, if some land's been taken, well, okay, that's what happens.
Well, it wasn't a war at the time. What was happening was that the war was over. There was an occupation of the West Bank. Palestinians, it was essentially what the UN called an open-air prison. There was an incredible amount of poverty. People weren't able to earn a living. We really felt that was
I get it. I get it.
And
many
we
people
agreed.
Listen, many people would agree with you. Many wouldn't, but many would. But I'm just curious why you would feel that passionately about the Palestinian people's right to have their land, but you would not feel that Ukrainians should have the right to keep their land. I'm just curious.
I never said Ukrainians don't have the right to keep their land.
So Putin should give it back.
What's that?
Putin should give it back to them.
I never said that either.
Well, what do you think?
I think we ought to stop this war. I think it's
We'd all love to stop the war, but what do you think happens to the occupied territory?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's
extraordinary. You seem to know very emphatically what you would do with the Palestinian-Israel situation, but you don't seem to have a clue what you would do about Ukraine-Russia, even though, to many people's eyes, it's exactly the same. You know, many people who argue the case for Palestinian rights to land agree completely that Ukraine has the same right. Just seems to me there's a bit of an inconsistency with your positioning. Would you accept that?
Not particularly. Like I said, we were opposed to the U.S. provoking that war in Ukraine. That's the position we took. And it was not Ben and Jerry's position. It was my position, along with the Eisenhower Media Network. And what we said was, let's stop fighting. Let's have a ceasefire. Let's use our words. You know, let's have adults talk to each other and work out a solution, as opposed to having to kill a couple 100,000 people first and spend trillions of dollars in the process.
Okay. Let me bring Anson back in here. This issue going on with Elon Musk and Tesla is kind of fascinating. It's not in the same kind of wheelhouse, except that oddly, all the people that used to love Elon Musk, including many on the woke left, have now turned on him with a visceral hatred. And you're seeing Tesla cars being torched all over America and so on, and the share price diving or whatever. What do you think of that?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. It's the same people that literally 2 years ago were saying, oh, the conservatives are overreacting by boycotting Bud Light are now burning Teslas. So, you know, talk about the hypocrisy that we were talking about earlier. It's pretty comical. You know, Elon's a tough one to discuss, because the guy is the CEO of 6 different companies. And what might be good for some of his businesses by getting involved in politics are not good for other businesses. Obviously, in the case of Tesla, it really hasn't been good. If you take a look at the share price and then you take a look at some of the resale value of Tesla since he's gotten involved with the Trump administration, for Tesla, it really hasn't been good. And I think if Musk was just the CEO of Tesla, I think a lot of people would be saying that, man, like, this is not good for the business, and maybe we got to figure out some way that he takes a step back because he's been too involved with Tesla. And again, if I was a Tesla shareholder, not necessarily happy. The thing is with Elon, though, is that he has a lot of other businesses. For Twitter, this has been really good that he's gotten involved more on the political side. He opened up free speech. He had this whole debate about his whole platform should be open to everybody and all voices. Twitter usage and revenues is back to, I think almost record highs right now. And that business is doing incredibly well. And then his other business SpaceX being involved with the government and being able to rescue astronauts this past week from Boeing. I think it's been a huge boon to SpaceX. So it's really hard to tell with Elon Musk. And Elon Musk also just being the controlling shareholder and the majority owner of all these businesses. It's a little bit different. I think he plays in a little bit of a different ball game than others. And again, I can't think of another person that's the CEO in this entire world of 4, 5, 6, 7 different multi-billion-dollar companies. So it's just a little bit of a different situation. But in general, I don't like it when individuals who are the heads of companies are taking politicized positions, because I think that we see that what ends up happening, the share price of the company declines, the sales decline, customers decline, and ultimately that's the least sustainable thing that a business can do, because then they have to fire employees, they have to close factories, suppliers shut down. So it's best for companies to stay out of politics or stay in their political lane. I have no problem with, if you're Elon Musk and you're running a car company, opining on car emissions policies, opining on union related issues related to car factories. Those things are all in your lane. Some of the other issues that a CEO like Elon would be getting involved with, if you were just the CEO of Tesla, I would have issues with. You think about Ben, he opened this call by talking about he just wants everyone to have fair and equal opportunities. I think that, for most people, everybody wants people to have fair and equal opportunities, but we get back to then, like, what does that mean? And that's the problem when companies get involved, whether it's on the Israeli-Palestinian side. Is it fair that a bunch of innocent Israelis were captured and then murdered on October 7th? Is that fair and equal? I don't think so. Is it fair and equal that you have we had to put in voter integrity laws because it seems like there were people showing up without IDs? I don't know if that's fair or equal. We had unlimited immigration in this country over the past couple of years. Was that fair and equal to people that all of a sudden were displaced when migrant or illegal immigrants were placed in their high schools or taking up hotel rooms in the areas? Is that fair and equal? I think these are debates that we as kind of co-equal citizens, we all tend to have, but we should have that sort of in the democracy that we live in. And for the most part, it shouldn't be companies, and it shouldn't be companies the ones that are taking positions on all of these issues, because it leads to declining share prices. As customers, they sort of fragment because they don't like necessarily politics coming with their products.
Right. I mean, Ben, there's a big story involving Ben & Jerry's. Your chief executive, David Stever, was removed by the parent company Unilever earlier this month in a growing row over political activism. It comes a month after Ben & Jerry's accused Unilever of demanding that it stops publicly criticizing US President Donald Trump. The filing said Unilever has repeatedly threatened Ben & Jerry's personnel, including CEO David Stever, should they fail to comply with Unilever's efforts to silence the social mission. Pretty controversial scenario there between you and the parent company. What can you tell us about that?
Well, when the company was sold to Unilever, Ben & Jerry's used to be an independent, publicly held company. When it was sold to Unilever, which was something I tried to avoid but was not able to, there was a unique governance structure that was set up whereby there was a legally empowered independent board of directors that had authority over 2 of the 3 missions of Ben & Jerry's. Ben & Jerry's has a social mission, it has a product mission, and it has an economic mission. And the independent board of directors got the legal authority to determine the social mission of the company. So what's happened now is that recently the company wanted to put up a post in favor of dismantling white supremacy. They wanted to put up a post agreeing with free speech and against the arrest of this guy at Columbia. So that was not Unilever's authority. That was not an area that Unilever legally had authority for, and so the board sued them, and now they are threatening to fire the CEO of the company, Dave Stever, a guy who started as a tour guide 35 or 40 years ago and has risen up the ranks to be an incredible CEO of the company.
Has it given you any pause for thought that this political activism stance that Ben & Jerry's takes, particularly if you have a parent company that doesn't agree with it, becomes a sort of act of self-harm?
It's definitely a problem when you have a parent company that doesn't agree with it. You know, Ben & Jerry's has been owned by Unilever since the year 2000, and pretty much up until, 2 or 3 years ago, things were going pretty well. But there's been a change in management at Unilever, and there's a lot of conflict right now.
In 2018, Ben & Jerry's said it was taking a stand against Trump by rebranding one of its flavors under the name Pecan Resist. Can we look forward to more resisting ice cream varieties now, second time round?
You never know.
Would you be happy with Ben & Jerry's actually coming out with a variety of ice cream which directly attacked Trump, given the emphatic nature of his win?
I think that Ben & Jerry's should be taking stands on issues. I'm not looking to attack particular people myself.
I mean, Trump, for example, Ben & Jerry's dropped a video announcing that it would never stop fighting for our democracy. This is when Trump returned to the White House. Unilever does a lot of business with Russia, with China. Have you made your feelings clear to them that you resent them doing business with democracy-loathing countries like Russia and China? Or does it only apply to America's president?
Personally, I have no problem with doing business with Russia, China.
Really?
Yeah.
So why do you have a problem with Trump and democracy? Why are you releasing through Ben & Jerry's videos saying you'll never stop fighting for democracy?
I think there was a bunch of undemocratic actions that Trump was taking in this country.
Well, hang on. So just to be clear, you have a problem with actions that may damage democracy in the United States. You have absolutely no problem doing business with Russia and China.
I don't believe that every country in the world needs to be a democracy. And actually, I don't really believe that the U.S. is a democracy in practice.
Right, but why do you care?
It's supposed to be one person, one vote, but it's $1, one vote.
Right.
I mean, billionaires and corporations control our legislation through lobbying. They control who gets elected through political donations.
Would you be happy doing
represent
business?
the money.
Would you be happy doing business with North Korea?
I believe that we need to get along with nations around the world. I don't believe that every nation has to have the same form of government. No, I don't believe that it makes sense for anybody to ostracize other nations and have wars with them, or
would you have done business with the Nazis out of interest?
No.
Why?
They're an exception.
Why?
Well, because they were engaging in genocide.
Right. But you have no problem with anything that, say, the Chinese are doing to the Uyghur Muslims?
I have problems with things that most countries are doing. I have problems with things that the U.S. is doing. That's okay. It doesn't mean that we have to consider them to be enemies. Our capital in Washington, D.C. was built by slaves. Is that worse than what China is doing with the Uyghurs? I don't know.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed. Appreciate the debate.
All right.
Thanks, Piers.
Good seeing you all.
Disney's remake of Snow White has become one of the most preemptively hated movies in the history of Hollywood. It's finally out this week after a disaster-strewn 2-year build-up. The downfall began in 2023 when star Rachel Ziegler, heralded as the boundary-breaking first ever Latina Snow White, condemned the beloved fairy tale as creepy, predatory, and sexist. It then emerged that Disney had axed the seven dwarves, apparently to avoid typecasting and defending actual dwarves. This all came as a nasty shock for dwarf actors who already compete for a very limited number of lucrative roles.
Characteristics, separate characteristics. They weren't these cave-dwelling monsters that people speak of. They all had 7 different characteristics for 7 different actors that from my community, and I don't feel it's right that got taken away from us.
And utterly agree with you. And the irony is that they profess, these progressives, to want to do this to protect you. Well, I'm delighted to say that Dylan will be rejoining us shortly to give an update, but I'm afraid it's not a happy ever after scenario. The 7 dwarves were first replaced by 7 diverse magical creatures, whatever that means. And as fury mounted, Disney did decide to bring the dwarves back. Instead of dwarf actors, human actors, they used cheap CGI dwarves that look like garden gnomes. With a budget of $270 million and one of the most popular stories in history, how did it all go so badly wrong? We're joined to explain all this, Uncensored contributor Esther Krakue, Gary Buechler, aka Nerdrotic, the critical drinker Will Jordan, and author of the case for cancel culture, Ernest Owens. Welcome to all of you. All right, let me start with you, Nerdrotic, on this. Where did it all go so catastrophically wrong? Was it Rachel Ziegler, appointing one of the wokest actresses in history? Was that the catalyst for all this? Or was it virtue signaling gone mad? What do you put your finger on?
I think it was. I mean, we can start out with the creative bankruptcy of remaking another animated classic instead of making something new. But yes, it's all Rachel Ziegler and her behavior. And if it was just one comment, it probably would have been forgotten by now. But it was comment after comment, and it was pissing off everybody, pissing off old Disney fans, pissing off new Disney fans, pissing off Trump supporters, pissing off all of America. And it became such a disaster that they had to shut her up, which was the smartest move they made. But the onus is all on her and Disney's reaction to it. And quite frankly, if she has said nothing, her movie, probably still forgettable, would have done a lot better.
Critical drinker, I mean, it's even down to the fact that Rachel Ziegler and is it Ziegler or Ziegler, by the way?
I think it's Ziegler.
Ziegler, I think is how you pronounce it.
It's Ziegler, right. Yeah. Let's just clarify that. The battle between her and Gal Gadot, right, is that they take diametrically different views even on things like the Israel-Hamas war. Ziegler publicly supporting Palestine. Gal Gadot served in the IDF and wrote, "I stand with Israel, you should too, the world can't stand on the fence," so on. So here are the 2 stars of the movie, even diametrically opposed in a very polarizing manner over a big war that's raging.
Sure, it feels like every aspect of this movie just seems to breed controversy, and yet that's just another aspect of it. By all accounts, they do not get on particularly well. I think you could tell that from their body language when they were presenting an Oscar together. They just could not have disliked each other more. So yeah, it's just another nail in the coffin of this movie, unfortunately.
Ernest, you've seen it, so what do you think? Don't tell me, you loved it.
I loved it, it was incredible.
Of course.
I think that Rachel, well, you can say of course, but you haven't seen it, so you might agree with me.
I've read some of the previews of people who have.
She's vocally
been killing it.
She's vocally talented. She's crushing it. A lot of people saw first previews, and movie critics are already saying great things about her performance. She's whimsical, she's funny, she's lighthearted, and it's a great film. And I also think Gal Gadot plays the evil witch very, very well. And so I think they both were perfectly cast for the film, and I think that it's going to be a great film that's going to get over $100 million in the global box office.
Which is great, because they only spent
haters are going to hate.
Well, actually, hang on, they spent nearly $300 million, so that would be a catastrophic failure. You realise that, Ernest?
Actually, 350.
I mean, look, I think that...
So, Ernest, you think it would be a success if it grossed $100 million, having cost $350 million to make? Is that your position?
I'm talking about opening weekend. We saw this with the Lion King remake. Everybody was acting like it was going to flop, but I think it's going to be a slow burner. I think it's going to do the same thing that the Lion King did. Not equally, but I do think there's going to be a build-up, and I think that the performances speak for themselves.
Well, in as much as Rachel Ziegler tap dances on my last good nerve, she is a talented singer. However, that was not what this film was about. There are many talented singers in Hollywood. Snow White shouldn't have been the shade of Snow Latte, first of all. I think the casting was probably the biggest thing. Barring the fact that even if she'd kept her mouth shut, which she should have, because there was a lot of money riding on this, the casting was off. I love Gal Gadot, but she's not a very emotive actress. And I don't think... there are limits to how far I can stretch my imagination to believe that someone who looks like Gal Gadot would be jealous of the appearance of someone like Rachel Zegler.
But isn't the problem that every time you say it's not about
all.
whether she opened her mouth or not? Isn't the problem that literally every time she opened her little woke mouth, all hell broke loose? Yeah. She called the prince basically a stalker. She then hammered Israel. She then told Trump supporters she didn't need their business. Imagine being a Disney executive and you hear the star of your new Snow White remake alienating more than half the country. The Republicans just won a big win, right? Alienating them all in one fell swoop.
Yeah, the smartest thing they did, as Gary said, was to try and bury her and just
hang on, Ernest.
anyone.
Hang on, critical drinkers talking.
Yeah, the smartest thing, as Gary said, that Disney could have done was to bury her and just keep her from talking to anyone. Do not give her a hot mic and do not let her spout her stupid, uninformed opinions. She's a kid. She's a dumb, uninformed kid who's never done a day's work in her entire life. And of course, she has an opinion on everything. That doesn't mean we have to
It's not about
keep
being
her.
a woman. She couldn't point to Israel on a map. The fact that someone like Gal Gadot, who's actually had a career, had to sit next to this spouting munchkin, or someone who actually has a career, who I'm pretty sure the hardest role in her life was pretending to be jealous of the looks of Rachel Zegler. And this is not to take away from the fact that she is a talented singer.
Who has the Golden Globe, though?
Hold on, Rachel Zegler is very talented.
By the way, she's not even white, is she? I mean, isn't that the other problem?
I'm not even going to get into that. We know she's Snow Latte.
The original description of Snow White's skin in the book is as white as snow.
Yeah.
Lips as red as blood, hair as black as ebony. Couldn't be clearer.
They missed the mark there. They should have casted me.
Nerdrotic, should we care that she wasn't as white as snow?
A fairy tale.
Well, people have eyes.
Well, hang on, that's for Nerdrotic.
Oh, that's sorry. Apologies, Piers. I think it does matter because it is, if you want to remake a Disney, I mean, there are tens of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 remakes of Snow White or adaptions of the story. But if you're remaking the Disney classic that started the company, I would think you wanted to make it as close as possible to the original, including the dwarves and including the main character, Snow White.
Well, we're going to come. We're going to come to the dwarf part, which is just beyond parody, to be honest with you. But Ernest, the British Board of Film Classification has put trigger warnings on here to say a woman is deliberately poisoned and a girl is surrounded by ominous trees. Can I ask you? I've never understood who these trigger warnings are aimed at. Who could be that pathetically spineless and lily-livered and weak and snowflakey that they need to be warned that in a animated movie, they're going to have, well, it's not fully animated, it has animated in it, that in this you might get things which might be a little unsettling. Are you the guy that they're doing this for?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I don't live in Britain, but I do think it's interesting that there's a lot of critique around censorship. You all are supposed to be the bastions of free speech and expressions, and you all are turning over snowflakes because Rachel Ziegler said a couple of different things that don't ruffle your feathers politically. I think you all are the cancel culture crew. Maybe you all should be, co-authors of my book, since you all seem to agree about
I've got
how
no problem
problematic
with, listen,
and how
clear,
issue and ominous.
I have no problem with Rachel Zegler spouting
off. If she was a
off.
Trumper, you would agree.
Listen, I've got no problem
you would
with her
agree. If she was a Trumper, you wouldn't be having this conversation.
I respect her right to spout any nonsense she likes. Doesn't mean to say that we can't criticize her for it. She can say it.
No,
of course
but you
she
said
can.
she should be silenced. That
she
Disney
should be
shut her up.
silenced.
That's what you said.
No, I said if you're Disney.
Right, you said she should be silenced.
If you're Disney,
Disney,
Ernest, you want her to shut up and stop trashing the movie.
She shouldn't have taken the role if she was going to jeopardize $350 million.
Hang on,
That's
critical drinker.
Yeah, can we look at this from a business perspective, right? Ultimately, Rachel Zegler is there as a representative of the Disney company. She's there to sell a product. In this case, the product is Snow White the movie. Now, the best way to sell a product is to appeal to as many people as possible. And if you straight up say that 50% of your audience can get fucked, then you're not really appealing to a wide audience, are you?
It's just bad business. Let's bring in somebody who has seen it.
But you're proving my point, though.
Hang on.
There's a double standard.
No, nobody said
If it was a Trumper,
Everyone should keep their mouth
it on the
shut.
opposite
Snow
end.
White
You wouldn't
should be
consider the other
beautiful.
50% of Americans.
Hold on. No. Everyone should
You
keep their
wouldn't
mouth
care.
shut. Snow White should be beautiful. She should turn up on set. Her skin should be white as snow, and she shouldn't. What's next? A bald Rapunzel. It's not hard to do this properly. A beautiful singing actress who keeps her mouth shut unless she's talking about the film and how great it is, so she doesn't tank $350 million. It's not hard.
It's not hard. Let's
You
bring
don't
in
believe
someone.
what you're saying.
Hang on. Let's bring in someone. I want to bring in someone who's seen the film. This is the publisher of Film Threat, Chris Gore. Chris, you've seen the film. Is it any good?
Yes, I have. Well, I'll have to give it up to Rachel Ziegler. She has quite a singing voice. She's actually very good, and it's a solid 3 out of 10 on every level. Every other level, you can judge the film. It is a colossal disaster, from the over-bloated exposition to the dwarves. The dwarves are an ungodly nightmare. Why they did it in CG, I do not know. They put 7 little people out of work for this.
Ridiculous.
They are horribly animated, horribly. I think might scare young children, but really, in the end, it was ill. It was a bad decision even to make this. And it's not as woke as it could have been, but there is messaging underneath. They might as well have said the words equity, because they went right up to that line and didn't say it. But it's terrible and torturous. I can't imagine kids are gonna love it. But wow, they really had an opportunity and failed.
I mean, it's going to be interesting how it does at the box office, because they spent so much money on this. The pre-publicity has been so awful that if it gets off to a very poor start, you could see this becoming a real turkey.
Well, I don't know. I really think that the advanced ticket sales are in the gutter. They're trash. People are posting screenshots of empty theaters, but this is not a movie. This is a movie where families will decide to see a movie, not buy advanced tickets and walk up. So it could go either way. I think in the end, because of the budget, it's a financial disaster. And it just shows how creatively bankrupt Disney is as a studio, that they're even considering doing this. These live action remakes have all been awful. And this one has been burdened by, of course, Ziegler and her being very outspoken politically, probably a bad choice. They didn't rein her in soon enough. I don't think she understood the responsibility of taking on this role. So where her career is after this, I think Broadway, but she will never be an actress that will be at the head of a tentpole big blockbuster. No one will take a risk on her. And this movie will prove that out.
Chris Gore, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Well, let's get into this this other aspect of it, which was the ludicrous decision to not actually use dwarf actors to play Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And Critical Drinker, my whole position on this is from the start has been, in the dwarf actor world, there is not a bigger gig or a more lucrative, better paid gig out there in Hollywood than playing one of the dwarves in a Disney remake of Snow White. And yet, in an effort to supposedly be more inclusive and to signal their virtue for what they saw as a marginalized group of people in society, they completely screwed them over. And they deprived 7 dwarf actors of great jobs. They then tried these mystical beast nonsense, then they abandoned that and they brought in CGI versions of dwarves, which apparently look and sound absurd in the film. What is going on here? What's the mindset behind this?
I think you're giving them too much credit by implying that there is a mindset behind it. This is where ideology ends up tying itself in knots, to the point where you've got a Snow White who isn't white, you've got a search for true love that doesn't have true love in it because that's problematic, and you've now got the 7 dwarves who aren't dwarves but now are dwarves again, but they're CGI dwarves because we don't want to employ real dwarf actors. It's absurd. It's the complete absurdity of modern Hollywood. They are so desperate not to offend anyone that they end up screwing up everything that they do.
They were fired for their own good.
Disney are facing a big protest and backlash from dwarf actors and actresses over the decision to replace Snow White, Seven Dwarfs with CGI characters. Returning to Uncensored is Dylan Postl, aka Hornswoggle from WWE. Dylan, great to see you again. What a mess Disney made of this. But just on that point, we discussed this before, but what I really resent is that dwarf actors have been deprived of potentially one of the best gigs of their entire careers.
You know, Piers, you mentioned the 7 actors, but what about the stunt doubles and the stand-ins and all of that? Now you're talking 12 to 15 at least people in the acting industry from my community that got left out of jobs. And here's the thing: this isn't, to me, was it Disney's call? Sure, but this all falls back on what Peter Dinklage said on that podcast about what is he on his soapbox about for all of these years, and him literally making that statement and canceling this whole community of their jobs, and what makes him the voice of my and our dwarf acting community and little people community. Why is it him that speaks up for all of us? I was on television for 10 plus years. Why is he being taken as the voice of the whole community? That's my issue.
What has been the?
I would have.
Has he faced a big backlash now? Because I completely agree with you. Who appointed him, the great high priest of deciding what work goes to who?
From me, he sure has. I can't speak for the others, but for me, he sure has. Because again, what makes it okay? What producers, directors? I would love these roles. I would love all of these roles. I would love any roles, whether they're written for a dwarf actor or whether they're written for another actor. Any role is okay for anyone. That's the issue. That's the thing of where I'm coming from. Me going out for a role doesn't necessarily have to be a dwarf casted role, but these were dream roles. 7 dream roles in a major production.
Yeah.
A major production. Disney never does anything small, as we know. Disney does big things. This is a dream role for people of my community.
Of course it is. And the other thing, I just thought that the secondary phase, when they brought in these magical creatures, which were all of varying heights. Some were very tall, right? I mean, I don't know how that made you feel, but, you know, I just thought it was absurd.
I mean, I just think it was. I think it was trying to fix an immediate voice and fix that issue. Who knows? But again, I go back to, why is it one voice that matters? Why aren't we taking other people in the community? And this doesn't just go for my community. It goes for any community. Why aren't we taking other voices into consideration?
I heard that the dwarf actors were not even asked to voice the CGI characters. They didn't even get voiceover action here, which again,
I have no idea about that, but who knows? I mean, that's the whole thing is ridiculous to me. And here's the thing: someone said about how it's not original or their creativity is out the window. I don't feel that way. I love these remakes. I'm a Disney fanatic. I'm a Disney adult, as they say.
Same.
These live action remakes, I love them. But the issue is, Snow White is what kicked off the Walt Disney film franchise and company. So now, argue with me if you want, who was the star of Snow White? Was it Snow White, or did the dwarves stand out the most? The dwarves are what you remember about the film. 7 different characters with different personalities who now could have been 7 different actors with different personalities and different dream roles. And
you know what's really laughable in a sick way is if you ask Disney at the time why they were doing this, and say, we're being progressive, we're listening, we feel they're listening to people like Peter Dinklage and say, yes,
No, they're listening to one.
Yeah.
They're listening to one, not
right, that's my point.
So they take him multiple.
So they take him as
that's my issue.
Yeah, I agree.
They're listening to one voice.
Right, I agree. But what they're doing, they're making him
to me, he's not. I never voted him as president of my community.
Right.
I never voted that. He's the one that spoke up because he had that voice on that podcast. I get it. I really, really do. He had a huge platform, and he said that on a platform, and it just got buzz. I understand that. But then why not after that go to other dwarf actors? Or even not even dwarf actors, just people in the dwarf community.
Yes.
And be like, hey, you take this offensively? No. I would bet my house that, yes, 10 people, 9 in the dwarf community are going, no, that's great for our community that they're getting major roles.
I think Peter Dinklage owes you all a massive public apology. And it's fine for him because he's made his millions.
He won't.
He's made his millions.
And he won't do it. The issue is he won't do it. The check from Elf when he took that role cashed perfectly fine.
Exactly.
Cashed perfectly fine.
Exactly. Fine for him, not fine for everybody else. It's brilliant to talk to you, Dylan.
Yes, sir.
You've been such a great advocate on this. Honestly, every word you say about it just rings so true.
This isn't. And again, this isn't about me personally.
No,
this is
I
about
know.
the dwarf acting community.
I mean, can I just say,
and even above that go ahead.
No, I don't mean to trivialize this, but this kind of reminds me of what was done to like ring girls who were basically fired for their own good. So I'm not a huge boxing fan, but I went to see a boxing match in London, not of my own volition, I was on a date. And I was like, this is great. I get to see some boxing and, you know, I get to see some cheeks as well. This is fun. And there was no cheeks. It was just, you know, bloody boxing. And then I asked one of the staff there, where are the ring girls? Like, I came here, this is part of the reason why I came. And they were like, no, they were fired because of equality. And I feel like this is kind of a similar thing. You know, something has been happened on behalf of a community without actually the community's input.
Nobody asked the ring girls if they...
Exactly, and it looks great to me.
I feel this is completely different, ma'am.
Really?
This is absolutely completely different.
Fair enough.
Absolutely completely different. I'm in the sports entertainment world. I can't take your side on that.
Okay.
So
fine.
this is literally people just going out for these roles that were made for them, and now they're taken away because one voice.
Yeah, I think I
person
totally agree with you. But, Dylan, great to see you. Thank you very much.
It's nice to see that you're an advocate for DEI, Piers. I'm happy to see that.
What's that?
I'm saying I'm happy to see that you're an advocate for DEI. It's refreshing.
In what sense?
Well, I mean, you know, it's interesting because so much of the show in the past and just these narratives lately have been about cutting jobs and being efficient. And you're advocating for Disney to do more inclusive work.
No, you're missing the point.
You can't do both.
You're missing the point. When the movie is called...
I think I do.
No,
I agree. I agree
no,
with
it's
you.
not DEI to think the dwarves should play dwarves.
No,
I think
it's
dwarf actors
authenticity.
should have been in the film. I agree with you on that.
It's authenticity. It has nothing to do with DEI.
Nothing
DEI
to
has
do
nothing
with
to do
it
with merit
whatsoever.
But
and
it is,
authenticity.
though.
Ironically,
It is,
what is okay? If it's DEI, what is
don't agree with it or
what
not?
is
I'm
inclusive about excluding
You're always confused,
dwarf
dude.
actors from the roles?
No, I'm saying. I mean, I agree with you. I think that there should have been dwarf representation.
Yeah,
I
but
think
you don't
that they
think
should
that a
have been
white
for
woman should have
accuracy.
played Snow White, which is
you know,
interesting.
Piers, we've had
Wait,
this
hold on.
conversation for a
where are
while
the limits?
about
Where are the limits
historical
of your
films,
advocacy?
Hang on.
and you said, could you play Nelson Mandela as a white guy?
Yeah.
And I told you, I don't think so.
No.
And
Well,
you
why?
were very much like, well, you thought it was important about the accuracy about that. And now you're saying a fictional character like Snow White, I guess, can't be played by a Latino woman because a fairy tale narrative, I guess, Brandy shouldn't play Cinderella because Cinderella was white.
Snow White
I guess
had
the
skin
classic
white
Disney
as
version.
snow. Hold
I'm
on,
just
no, I'm
saying.
sorry. I don't understand the limits of your advocacy. Snow White was called Snow White because her skin was as white as snow. I don't understand the logic of having a beige lady play Snow White when there are perfectly available white actresses that could play
same
that.
way Jesus is played by a white man.
Ryan Gosling isn't playing M'Baka or something from Black Panther. Like, I don't, where are the limits of your advocacy?
All right,
So
well,
it's
look.
okay for one race, but not another.
Yeah, I think the whole point is they are dwarves in the movie, and dwarf actors were deprived of playing them. That's not a DEI issue.
Yeah,
it's
and
just
it's
an
common sense.
authenticity
And-
outrage. I want to
as he
end on
pointed out-
something.
It just wasn't human dwarfs.
I want to end on something which we may all agree with, even you, Ernest, which is, are Hilaria and Alec Baldwin the most annoying people on God's earth? But do we now have a scintilla of sympathy for Alec Baldwin after we saw this clip of them on a red carpet talking about their god-awful reality show? Take a look.
I think we're gonna see, you know, we're gonna see how it feels to have it be out there.
It's gonna be great.
This
You're a
season-
winner.
Oh my God, when I'm talking, you're not talking.
Sorry.
No, when I'm talking, you're not talking. This is why, yes, we'll have to just cut him out of the show. No, no, I mean, I think this is a really, raw show, and it's very real, and we took a lot of chances. And, you know, I think that we'll see where it leads us. We'll see what it feels like to have to be out there, and then we'll see, you know, if people like it.
Oh my God, I'm talking and not talking. Not talking.
Oh my
It's
God.
that fake Spanish accent as well. Well, let me start with you,
Yeah, it's
Ernest,
fake.
on this.
It's
Come
fake.
on. I mean, she's a horror story. Any woman that does that to her husband on a red carpet, talking, not talking. I mean, it's unbelievable. What was going on?
What did she do in private?
Yeah, to be a fly on the
think
wall
that,
in
to
their
be
house
honest,
after
Oh,
that.
well,
They're on a
literally, they
reality
are a fly on the
show,
wall, aren't
and-
they? But Ernest.
But yeah, they're on a reality show, and they're doing what they do best. And I think in many ways, celebrity culture in that regard, it's cringy. It's cringy, and it has nothing to do with their political stances because they're a hot mess on that front. But I would honestly say that, you know, when you think about it, I mean, this is what happens when you have a camera on you for 24/7. It's not good for anyone.
Yeah, but actually, Esther,
even-
what it showed was a real glimpse into that marriage.
Yeah.
I've always felt a little bit of sympathy for her having to be married to an idiot like Alec Baldwin. But actually,
Your sympathy
watching
should
that
be the other
clip,
way.
it looks like he's in some sort of Misery remake.
Yeah. I mean, a few months ago, we were talking
They're
about whether
meant
he
for each
deserves.
other.
Well, I mean, we were talking about whether he deserves to go to prison a few months ago.
Mm.
I think this is a fate worse than prison. He has like 20 kids with this woman. You know,
He was hoping for a guilty verdict.
Fate's worth
18 years. 18
He's
years.
incarcerated with Hilaria.
Yeah.
It is hilarious, isn't it, Nerdrotic?
It's absolutely hilarious, and I don't have any sympathy for Alec Baldwin whatsoever. I think the universe tends to unfold as it should. So
Karma
there you
is
go,
a
buddy.
bitch,
Good
baby.
luck.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, he's
her
got
name
the
is
living
Hilaria
prison
Baldwin.
sentence everyone else thinks he should actually
Yep.
have. Critical drinker. You know what I was really surprised about? I mean, on their actual reality show, there's a load more of this stuff in it. It's unwatchable, tosh, really. But also, once again, Alec Baldwin portraying himself as the kind of victim of the whole shooting incident on that set, when in fact a beautiful young woman was shot dead by Alec Baldwin. Now, I don't believe he did it deliberately, obviously, but he had the gun in his hand that killed this woman, right? And the idea you then do a whole reality show for personal gain, millions of dollars, in which a lot of it is there. How's he doing with it all after the shooting? How's the family? What about the poor woman who died? What about her family?
Yeah, it's such a transparent attempt to garner sympathy, like, because every scene is just them playing with their 500 kids or however many they've got, trying to act like normal human beings, and it's all just, hey, look at this guy, he's got so many people who depend on him, and he loves his kids, don't you feel sorry for him now? Not especially, no. And I just know behind the scenes they have probably a bunch of nannies who do most of the work for them, so it's just more
I feel sorry for the
Hollywood
kids.
fakery.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah,
sorry for
I
those
do,
kids.
yeah.
My God, where do you turn? Thank you, panel. That was terrific. Really appreciate it. Thank you
Cheers.
very much.
Thank you.
Piers Morgan Uncensored is proudly independent. The only boss around here is me. If you enjoy our show, we ask for only one simple thing. Hit subscribe on YouTube and follow Piers Morgan Uncensored on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And in return, we will continue our mission to inform, irritate, and entertain. And we'll do it all for free. Independent, uncensored media has never been more critical, and we couldn't do it without you.